Okay, we're going to go ahead and at least call the budget committee to order where we can at least start. And a fourth person from the education committee comes in, we'll be able to complete our business. For budget, we did have a meeting on May the 18th. There's a set of minutes.
Motion to approve. Second.
A motion and a second. Any questions? Comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, gentlemen, we're going to let y'all start.
Hey, you do have a copy of our proposed budget there in front of you. I'm just going to talk briefly about what you're going to see in this budget, a little quick summary. We've done a lot of work. I thank Michael and his staff and a lot of people. We've met with a lot of people in the last 9 months getting ready for this budget. One of the things you're going to notice that we are proud of, it's balanced. We're not coming in over here out into the deficit, and we feel comfortable that we're in good shape with that. As you go through that, Mike will take over in a few minutes, and he'll be able to go into more depth for you and answer any questions. But it is a balanced budget. It does include we have changed our pay plan, and that is reflective in our budget. And in that pay plan, we will be everyone in our district will receive a raise, some larger than others. Part of that, we did some studies and tried to match the market with teachers, years of experience, with principals, administrators across the board. Our classified will also receive a 2% raise. That's all we could do within our budget, and so we were able to do that for them, and so we feel good about that. It's a step, but it's not exactly where we need to be. But we were able to do it within our budget. We have made some adjustments within that budget. You will see those. Mike will be able to walk you through some of them to try to handle our money as wisely as we can and meet the needs of our district. When you get to the needs assessment, it will look rather large. But when we get to that point, I want to speak to that. I have a view of needs assessment is that's just what it is. We've assessed, and there's some needs in there. We've included some numbers, and Mike will be able to explain where those come from as placeholders in our needs assessment for West Wilson Middle and some other things. But the way I view needs assessment is these are things, if there's money available, these are things these are needs. They're not wants. And I wanted to put things on there to show you these are the things where you're going to see in upcoming years. Some of that needs assessment is from last year. So we do have a vision of where we're going, and we understand we got to work with you as partners to make this whole thing work for the whole county. And I hope you recognize that tonight in the budget. I will be here if you got any questions for me. If there comes to some things about instruction and stuff, he may want to refer to me. But he has done a tremendous job with this, meeting with departments, department heads. We've been through it and worked on things to try to meet our needs. The pay plan was the biggest thing this year. And when we get to that point, if you got questions, I'll be glad to handle all of those about that. It's not perfect, but it does make us more competitive. I'm all about we've got to be competitive with the people surrounding us, and that's where our goal was when we started with that, and we have made a dent in it. Of course, I will be the first one to know they're going to raise theirs on us again too, but we still think we have a pay plan that puts us in position moving forward to continue to build, and where everybody knows what they're getting paid, where's it coming from, and what we can do yearly to make sure that we're taking care of our employees. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Michael, and he will walk you right through it and answer any questions. And again, if there's something comes up you want me to answer, I'll be glad to do that.
Super small. So, as in years past, I'll go through in as much detail as the committees want, or in as little detail as y'all want. But I'll start out by showing you what's in front of you here. There is a memo right over the front cover. That is just a summary memo of kind of what's in here. Then there's a tab for each fund as you flip through there. And then the very last tab is going to be our needs assessments. We'll cover that at the end. but that's kind of the order of things. But I'll be glad to walk you through our general fund, talk about a couple of things that are in there. As Mr. Luttrell mentioned, all of the change to a new step plan and a 2% for people that are not on the step plan are reflected in these numbers in here. So that is, I have in there, if it includes any new items, I did not go through and list each single of the teacher, because all the teacher increases were different. So out of 1,300 or so teachers, there was almost 1,300 different changes in teacher salary. So I did not list each of them individually, or we would have been here all night. Does that make sense? And I'll be glad if y'all would like me to. Do you want me to go through each major category as in yours, like I did last year? Or? Okay. So starting off with the 141 revenues, if you'll flip there. And we were able to do a lot of this, with increase in revenues. One of the numbers that sticks out is going to be property tax. Me and Aaron have both looked at this number. Matter of fact, we've looked at it 2 or 3 times. So I have ran that number by Aaron for our property tax. And then our BEP number on there is based on an estimate from April, is the latest estimate we got. Obviously, that is subject to change, but we feel that it will not change materially, if at all. Last year, it did not change from April, but the state does reserve the right to change that. And go ahead, They send us a May estimate that we have not got yet, and then they also send a final June estimate. That June estimate generally does not come until June 30th, or sometimes it comes the first week of July. I don't anticipate that changing materially, and I do anticipate if that were to change very, very slightly, that we could make some accommodations to still keep a balanced budget. That's any other questions on revenue? I just wanted to hit the highlights right there. Any other questions there? Sales tax, I do anticipate sales tax being up very strong. Again, that was something me and Aaron both talked about when we looked at our increases in revenue. I think all around the state, sales tax is up. So I did not use a flat percentage. What I did is took an average based on 12 months. And that percentage it varies, because 1 month we had 30% increase in sales tax and 1 month we had 10. So I went with like an historical average based on the last 5 or 6 years. But it's hard because ours increased based on the sales tax referendum a few years ago. So I can only go off of 2 years really. And obviously we can't budget 10%, like it was some of the months this year. So I took kind of an average number, roundabout way to get to that number. I will share that. I will shoot you an Excel document. It's not a flat percentage. It's more of an average over the last really 24 months, and I'll shoot that to you. Any other revenue questions? Yes. Now, keep in mind that 7%, I do want to point out that all the percentages on there that you see that percentage is a comparison of the proposed budget and the revised budget. And the revised budget is subject to change. We will have one more budget amendment, I know, in June, coming to y'all in June. So the revised budget column will change slightly, as it does every year. But those percentages are from proposed to revised. And keep in mind as we go through this, our revised budget does include summer school funding, which will artificially inflate revenue and expenditures. Summer school funding is not in the proposed budget because we have not, we obviously don't have dollar amounts for next year's summer school. But just keep that in mind. As you'll see, for example, if you look down there from State of Tennessee, other state education funds, you'll see there's a $3 million number right there for revised budget, and next year we budgeted $130,000. That is because of the summer school funding right there. Summer school funding is usually around $3 million the last 2 years. All right. So I'll just go, if it's easiest, I'll just go major category by major category. We'll walk down through there. Regular instruction, of course, is where the bulk of our teachers are. That shows a 1% increase. However, the salaries are actually more than 1%. Our retirement rate for legacy teachers actually went down a small percentage this year, so that helps. And obviously, we put that additional into the teacher salaries up there. You'll see where that new teacher salary line item is $61 million versus last year's original, which was $58 million. So all of that went into the teacher pay. but we were able to fund our self-insurance fund again this year. And then you'll notice we did move substitute teachers. We have increased that cost to be able to increase sub-pay, and we have shifted line items for those for bringing those in-house. So I just want to point that out in that category. Those are the only major changes in that category. No new items, just shifting some things there. I have not. Principals are a major category by themselves. And I will state, all of this is pulled directly from the chart of accounts, all of these account names. So some of them I like, some of them I don't. But as Aaron can probably attest to, they make us follow them. So, but yes, I will get to principals and assistant principals here in a second. Any other questions on regular instruction category? So the next one is our special education category. The only thing that changed there would have been the increases in salaries that I talked about at the beginning. As you know, if we change anything in the special education category, we're responsible for maintenance of effort there. So we try to be very mindful of any changes we make to that category. But nothing changed there other than the salary changes that we talked about at the beginning. That will also go, is same true for the next category, vocational instruction. Now, that category shows a 0% increase. The reason for that is last year we funded startup costs for, if you'll notice there, for instructional supplies and materials, it went from $213,000 to $135,000. We funded startup costs for the ROTC program at Green Hill High School. That was a one-time cost, so that is why you're seeing a 0% increase, because those that program is up and running now for those supplies and materials. The next category is going to be support services. That category there's no new items. The reason it went up was the salary increases I talked about, and also the retirement rate actually increased almost 2% for classified employees. So you'll notice the retirement rate went up a little bit there, but there's no changes in that category. Well, I take that. We did reclassify one position there. The secretary, we reclassified that position, so you will see that's what makes for that 7% increase there. We reclassified that position. That position, as we went through and tried to make sure all of our positions at the district were applicable to what they were doing, this employee is actually retiring, and so that employee was actually doing way more than what they were actually being paid for. And so as that person is retiring out, we have reclassified that position on the pay chart. So no new positions there, just on a difference on the pay chart. An existing pay chart. We did not change the pay chart. Correct. So the next category is health services. The only change there is you'll see a 3% increase. We had to increase our medical personnel a little bit more for some PRNs. And essentially what those are sub-nurses for us. When some of our nurses are out, we've had a really big increase in that this year in cost. And so we had to increase that a little more than normal. But other than that, there's no changes there. All right, then the next category, I want to explain this. You'll see a 37% increase. But if you look at the original budget up there for guidance personnel, it started at $2.6 million. It went down to $2 million, and now we're budgeting $2.7 million. What happened is we had to move some of those guidance personnel into our federal projects fund throughout this year. They're coming back to our general purpose school fund. So that increase is actually a little bit inflated because it compares proposed budget to revised. But if you were to compare that proposed to original budget, that percentage increase is a lot closer to 2%. So no new personnel there. We actually we added one counselor at one of our schools, one of our middle schools, but no new personnel other than that one new counselor. Correct. I had to, yes, and I brought those as a budget amendment to move those to our federal projects funds earlier this year, and in this budget moves them back into our GP fund. Yes, ma'am. Correct. Yes, and then but also we did increase one counselor at one of our larger middle schools to make them on par with the rest of our middle schools. So that would be the only actual change, is that one new position for a counselor. Okay. The next category is going to be instructional support, and you'll notice it went down 7%. And if you remember, Mr. Luttrell eliminated one of the deputy director positions back at the beginning of this year. So that position stayed budgeted throughout the year. We brought a budget amendment at one time and shifted some of those funds. However, the remaining part of that position was still in the revised budget, so that's one of the reasons you'll see a negative 7% there. But other than that, no new positions in that category or nothing new. Any questions there? All right, and the next category is going to be special education support. Now that category went up, and that changed because some of our federal funds went away. So we did not want to lose those positions, and so we brought those positions back into GP. We had some special funds, some one-time funds that were not ESSER. They were some other special education funds, and we did not want to lose some of those coaches, and so they are in here. No new positions to the district, just new to this fund. Okay, and then the next category is going to be vocational support. There is no changes to there other than the salary changes I talked about at the beginning. Next category is going to be technology. The only change here, there's no new positions. With all of the construction and stuff we're doing, we have increased the computer personnel line item a tad to account for some of our overtime there that we're spending when, for example, So we did have to increase that a tad when they're going up and setting up portables. We've been able to do all that in-house, so that has saved us a lot of money. And then we did have to increase some of our software costs under other contracted services. It went up $50,000. That's due to a lot of our softwares are based on student enrollment numbers, and our enrollment is up 1,100 or so students. So when they charge per pupil, our costs go up. But other than that, no new positions there, no new items. The next category is Board of Education. There's no new items here other than some increases to Trustees Commission. You'll probably see a budget amendment from that coming up in June from us, but that's anytime you have increased revenue, you have to increase Trustees Commission. Our property and casualty and workers' comp insurance did increase a little bit, so there's an increase there. And then just like County Commission, the board member fees did change based on CTAS salary schedule. So those are the only changes in that category. The next one is going to be officer superintendent. No new positions there. The only changes would be the salary changes I talked about at the beginning, but no changes there. All right, and the next category is principals that you were asking about. So that's going to be principals, the assistant principals, and those are going to be the bookkeepers at the schools. So now that category did change based on because we shifted principals and assistant principals to a step plan. So that line did change, no new positions, but that's why you see a 4% change there.
The reason why I was asking is that it's been rumored that the principal's got a $30,000 a year pay raise, and I wanted to address that to make sure that that didn't happen.
That did not. So let me address that then. So one of the things we did is we put both the principals and assistant principals back on a teacher pay plan. And so then we had to put a stipend amount. It's very similar to some school systems do a stipend or what they call an index. An index would just be a percentage increase. And so that is a stipend amount on top of teacher pay. So they did not get, I can assure you, no principal got a $30,000 raise or anywhere close to that. But that $30,000 would be the principal stipend for a high school principal with an enrollment over 1,000 students. And then the principal stipends vary based on enrollment, based on if you're a high school, middle school, a K-8 school, or an elementary school. So high schools, the categories break down. I'll read them to you, make sure I got them correct. So high schools over 1,000 students, that supplement would be $31,000. High schools with less than 1,000 students would be $23,000. And then middle schools with over 900 students would get a $21,000 supplement. Middle schools with less than 900 students would get an $18,000 supplement. K-8 schools and elementary schools with K-8 schools over 600 and elementary over 800 would get an $18,000 supplement. and K-8 schools and elementaries with less than 600 for K-8 and less than 800 for elementary would get $15,000. And
We put them back on a teacher's pay plan. And the reason I wanted to do that is multiple. First one is, I value experience. I think the more you do something, you should be better at it, you should get paid more for it. And what we were doing previously, it was possible, our principals could, they were static for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. So we looked at that, so put them back on a teacher plan, and then they get their stipend. So that's where that, I think some people would they're getting this big raise. Now, did they get a raise? Absolutely. Also, went and looked at comparable districts around us, and what they're paying principals. What we're getting them to is still not what they would make in other districts. One of the things that was concerning for me is we had elementary principals in other districts making more than our big middle school principals. And that was alarming for me.
let me say this. I looked at, just as a comparative, I looked at Rutherford's schedule. One of their indexes for their high school principals was 40%. So that means they take their teacher pay at a 260-day rate and they times it, an additional 40%. And so we were trying to get close to that. Now, I know we can't get there, in 1 year, but we want it to be more competitive. And I'll say under our old system, I could have an elementary principal with 30 years of experience, and I could have an elementary principal with 1 year of experience. And they're both going to make the same exact dollar amount under the old system. And so we really wanted to be able to take into account experience.
Since there's been so much confusion about the pay plan, just for complete clarification, so say, for example, you had a principal who was a high school principal of over 1,000 students, and they have been a teacher for 20 years and have a master's degree for 260 days, so you would pull that number off of the chart, and then you would add $30,000 to it. Is that correct?
If you're over, you had 31 if you're over 1,000 students for high school.
Okay, I apologize. We don't have the schedule. So.
No, I just didn't want somebody to say, well, they said 30,000. So we want to post this. I will say, me and Mr. Schloesser talked about this. We wanted to post it after we met with y'all tonight because obviously if y'all chose to not like my revenue estimates, then, so, but,
And I will say this too. This is how we used to do it, we used an index. And this allows us to really look at going forward, just in budgeting purposes. It's easier to find a little bit, if you want to bump and give them something on that supplement, than it is to try to find and pull a bunch of money and attack it. And again, I will say, it's not where it needs to be. We're talking principals can leave our county under our present plan and make as much as $25,000 more in other counties. And the way our schools perform, we've got to protect those people so that they respect
Oh,
us.
that's understood, right?
Right. Since we're talking about the teacher pay plan, I've gotten a lot of questions about this, so I said I would ask some specific questions. So if you're a teacher, the idea behind the metric is that it's a step bump, correct? It's not necessarily a raise. So the idea is you move from, again, I don't have it in front of me, but say you're moving from 3 years to 4 years, it's $500 or whatever it is on the scale. And then the idea is that if there's additional revenue, that there would be 1% or 2% across the board for everyone.
on top of that
On
step.
top of that, exactly. So again, it's going to be
Correct.
revenue.
That's how most districts do it. I'll use that for example. Williamson, Rutherford, both of those districts this year proposed a 5% and a 4%. So it'd be on top of that step. So if your step was $500, if your step was $2,000, a couple of Rutherford steps are $2,600. That 2% or that 5% or 4%, whatever you did, would be on top of that. Yes.
This is, like you said, this is the way we used to, when I used to be on the negotiating team many years ago, this was what we dealt with. So we're not going backwards in my.
And let me say this, one of the reasons we chose to propose a supplement, like a flat dollar amount, was because when you get into an index, you get into rounding and stuff. And one of the things we've learned is I'll have a teacher who calls me and says, hey, or even a classified employee who says, hey, I was supposed to get a 2% raise. And let's say we rounded to the nearest dollar. They may have rounded to the nearest 50 cents. And so when you get on some larger dollar amounts, and let's say the index is 1.4 or 1.29, 1.288, it's, you know, where do you round? And when you start getting larger dollar amounts, as me and Aaron can to attest on the property tax and the ADA rate, you know, it could be off somebody $5, $10, $100, depending on, you know, where that round is. So we just thought it would be simpler to look at where you make on the teacher scale, added a flat dollar amount, and now you don't have to call me and say, what number did you round to? That's the reason we chose. The index would be the same theory. We just were trying to simplify it.
I'd like to call this case to meet the order. We got minutes before us. I need a motion and a second.
Motion.
Guess I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same like sign. Thank you. We do it quick.
So no increase, no position changes for the principal category. But again, we did hope that clarifies for the supplement question there. The next category is going to be fiscal services. And a couple of these classified, for example, fiscal services, the next several categories are going to include mostly classified employees. So when you see this, you're going to see some that are a little higher than 2%. Like I said, keep in mind the retirement rate changed for classified higher. The legacy rate for employees went down. The classified rate went up almost 2% for retirement, and we don't set that rate. The state sets it for us, but I just wanted to clarify that. No new positions in the fiscal services category. And then human resources is the next one. We did add a position there, is why that percentage is a little higher. That is to bring our substitute teachers to handle those in-house, so that would be a full-time position to handle those. When our school board voted to bring substitute teachers back in-house instead of contracting that out with a third party. So to handle that, we hired a person to manage that, to manage all of our subs. Instead of hiring that out, we essentially shifted paying a contracted service to paying somebody.
Didn't some of that funding though come from regular instruction and special ed?
Correct. We shifted some. And then also, but on top of that, from regular instruction, you'll notice we wanted to increase sub rates. So some of it came from that, but we also increased regular instruction a little bit to try to increase what we pay our subs. One of the things that our board also voted on was it was really important to them to pay an interim sub more, especially for an interim certified teacher. We weren't able to get all the way where we wanted, but we were able to have a fourth category that paid, I think, $25 more a day for an interim sub, for an interim certified. So the proposed rate for next year for an interim certified sub would be $120. And then a regular certified sub, just subbing, as a regular sub, would be $95. $85 for a sub with like an associate's degree or some college experience. And then $80 for a high school diploma. And then $75 for our for an EA sub. And those are all increases from where we are this school year. And like I said, we'd like to do more. I know that was really important to the board, but with funds available, that's all we could do. The next category is going to be operation of plant. And you'll notice that one increased quite a bit. And the main increases for there were utilities. I think we brought in a budget amendment last month for natural gas. We may have to bring one more in June. But we had to increase all of our utility line items, plus Stoner Creek. We're anticipating, Stoner Creek being done next year. So that'll be a full elementary school back online that will be paying utilities for that we're not paying for right now.
I know it's janitorial services, maybe about 800,000, maybe 500.
Correct. That was due to the bid. We had to bid that out due to contract. This year we had to. So that would be the new contracted amount for custodial services. Okay. The next category is maintenance. The big change there is you'll notice we added a new account. We're trying to tackle some of our maintenance projects in-house instead of tackle a little by year instead of letting them build up and then we have to come ask to borrow money. So you'll notice an additional category there. That's for some additional maintenance projects. This year we were able to tackle some quite big ones, and we hope to do again that next year. This year we're replacing an elevator at one of our schools, at Mountain Juliet Middle School, replacing a chair lift at LZ Patton. So we're trying to tackle some of those things in-house before they get so bad we have to borrow for them. But that's what that additional category is down there at the bottom of that page.
Is there a number of employees changed there?
No, there is not. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we did shift. Yes, based on a budget amendment, we did shift one position to our technology department this current year. That's why if you'll notice, the revised budget went to 178 to 173. We did shift one position, but that was just current year due to a budget amendment. We shifted to our technology department, and that's how we've done a lot of our low voltage work in house, as I mentioned earlier. But we did that through a budget amendment this year. I will say in that, I will add, this is not a new position, but we do have a work-based learning student who's now working with our maintenance department. So we are, during the summer, allowed to pay that work-based learning student. And so you'll notice there's a little bit of increase there from $1238 from the original budget to $1281. That is not that entire salary for this gentleman. But he is able to make $10 an hour working for learning from our maintenance staff. And from what my maintenance staff has said, they really love him. And it's kind of like an apprenticeship program, and so it works really well. We do have that same program in our transportation department, and every time a kid, goes off to college or something, our transportation department calls us and asks for another one, so they seem to really enjoy that program. And the next category is transportation. You will notice, I want to point out this, we did add a new line item there for $70,000. That line item is for GPS for our bus units. That used to be paid out of diesel fuel line item. We have broken that out where it should be broken out under contracted services. And on top of that, we also had to increase fuel costs. Now, I want to point out, you'll see a 926 and it drops to 900. That 926 is due to our summer school grant to pay for the transportation to transport the summer school. So what I want to focus on is that 786 is what's allocated in the original budget to the actual school year. So we have increased that 786 to 900,000 for the actual school year, not for summer school. That 926 is specifically what the state gave us for summer school. That addition, the difference between 786 and 926. You will see a budget amendment from us in June. We have actually hit right at our diesel fuel line item already at that 786. So you'll see a budget amendment from us in June to increase that. We do. Starting pay today, I want to say, is $18 an hour. Now that would increase 2%, if this budget's approved. We have a transportation committee that will be presenting, I think in June, a transportation committee report to our Board of Education. And we looked at everything from bus aids to transportation pay to a number of different things, whether we want to do a daily rate, whether we want to continue with hourly rate. And so we'll be presenting a transportation committee report to our school board in June, is my understanding. It will not. Yeah, I have seen a preliminary copy of that, and from what we've seen, our bus driver pay is actually very competitive to the other districts that pay hourly. Now, you can't really compare us to necessarily Rutherford because they contract out all of their bus services. However, if you look at the districts around us that do pay their bus drivers, our pay is actually very competitive. And we're never going to be able to catch a six-figure year, trucking salary. We can't do that. I will, preemptively, one of the things you'll see is, some of our routes would like bus aids. For some of our more trouble routes, we'll talk about that in a minute on needs assessment. But, that was some of the things to come out of meeting with our bus drivers and stuff.
An hour amount that you're thinking about paying bus aids, or?
Well, not yet. I proposed a number there to budget for them to be full-time, but our board could say, hey, instead of 5 full-time, we want, 10 part-time. So we did propose, a roundabout number there, and but I'll get to that here in a second. Anything else on transportation? So I'll skip through the next two. You'll see the next one is COVID, and next one is food service. Both of those are due to grants that we no longer have, but when we print this out, they automatically show up. So those are no longer there. And then the next category is community services. That holds things like our Family Resource Center and those types of things. There is no changes there as far as personnel-wise. we did do a budget amendment. We did reclassify a position based on duties there, based on some people retiring out. That's why you see a negative percentage there, but there's no new, we didn't decrease positions and there's no new position. But as we went through every position this year, we tried to make sure everybody was being paid where they should be based on their job duty. And so this is an example of one where we shifted on the pay plan there. So, and the next one is going to be early childhood education, or our pre-K program. And the only change there is you'll notice it went down. That is due to, we had some EAs who, as we went through and looked at what job everybody was doing, maybe a principal shifted that EA without us knowing to a gen ed EA. So we had to shift that out of the pre-K budget into gen ed EA, general education EAs. And so you'll see there's a little bit of decrease in EAs there, but that's not due to decreases in positions, in total positions. That's just to classify them where they should be paid based on the job they're doing. No, so the supervisor over our voluntary pre-K program is also our supervisor over elementary education, and he is budgeted under instructional support in that category. Okay. So the next thing I want to touch on was capital outlay is the next category. Now, if you'll notice, the original budget is $190,000, and then we go to $1.6 million. That $1.6 million was due to a budget amendment we brought for a roof at Mountain Jewel Elementary that y'all approved earlier this year out of fund balance. That was a one-time cost for us, so that work will be starting in the next couple weeks. The materials are already here. The next year, we still have our $190,000 to $150,000 for our Safe Schools grant, and we were able to put some additional money into there again to do things like striping our parking lots, to painting some schools, some other capital outlay items that we're trying to attack in-house. For example, we have several, Mount Juliet Middle, Lakeview, Watertown Middle, all of those schools need new paint. Several of our older schools need parking lot restriping, or, for example, at Carroll Oakland the other day, we had a water main break, and we put gravel over that, but we need to patch that pavement so it's not, bumpy. Those types of things will be what that money there is spent for. So about $150 to $190, depending on the grant that we get, will be paid out of that line item for Safe Schools, and the remaining of that line item will be for capital projects like painting and restriping. And that $850 is not one-time cost. We have been able to budget that as reoccurring, so that's why it's a little different than the $1.6 million we brought as a budget amendment. And then the next is our two, one bond and one lease that was on there from last year. Those are just straight off of the payment schedule, those dollar amounts off of the amortization schedule. So that is it for the general fund.
So all of them paying out to be exactly like I was told. It was real close. Don't believe everything you hear out there.
So that's it for the general funds. Like I said, it is balanced. We are not in a deficit for that fund. Any questions?
I just have one, Michael.
Yep.
And I think I'm really, for my own edification and the edification of the board, if sales tax numbers slump below, maintenance of effort is just on a budget number. It's not on actual receipts.
That is correct.
We're under no obligation to make up any shortfall if sales tax comes up short.
That is correct.
Just wanted everybody to know that.
Don't be jinxing us now. All right, I will touch on a couple of the other funds really quick, just to go over them. As you know, our next fund is federal projects. All of those amounts in that entire fund are estimates. The state has not given us our final dollar amounts for any grant in there. We get what's called carryover amounts, which is what we don't spend. We do not get those until July, actually. So the state has us budget estimates, but just like in years past, the state approves that budget before it even goes to our board. But we did book some preliminary estimates in there for 142 as the state requires. But so in the previous year, it is reduced because of ESSER. ESSER was one-time money, and so as we spend ESSER down, it would go back to our general amount. If you look at FY22, it's around $10 million. I anticipate it going back to $8 to $10 million. But that would be the reason it's reduced. Any questions on our federal projects fund? All right, and the next fund is going to be our cafeteria fund. The only big change there, just to make everybody aware, is right now the USDA provides free lunch for every child. We've been told that's going away June 30th, so we will now have to be charging for meals, and it'll be back on the free and reduced lunch system. So that'll be a change. That's why you'll notice some line item revenue changes there, but that's a change out of our control. We just wanted to point that out. And then our last fund that's required to be budgeted is Fund 146, our Extended School Program Fund. There's no changes there. Just estimates based on enrollment, but no changes. Okay, and then the last fund, and I'll tie this in a little bit to start talking about needs, and then I'll let Mr. Luttrell take back over. So our Capital Projects Fund 177 is not required to be budgeted. However, we choose to budget just in case we ever have recurring revenue in there. Yes. So if you'll notice, we are operating, that fund shows a deficit of $16,600,000. It showed a deficit last year. That's to us having insurance money left over. That insurance money came in a previous fiscal year. So we're still spending that just as we're still building Stoner Creek. Now, the reason you'll see a bonds issued number under revenue of $60 million and building construction of $76 million, that $76 million would be to continue the construction of Stoner Creek. And then the remaining portion of that is just a rough estimate for West Wilson Middle School. We do plan to have a more exact estimate for you at the June Budget and Education Committee. I think that's June 9th. We'll be presenting something there. We did open a bid for West Wilson Middle School for, I want to say it was $51 million. Is that off the top of my head? $51 million approximately. Now, that's just the GC bid. We'll be bringing a more exact dollar amount of what the FF&E will cost with that. Now, that is without FEMA reimbursement. I just want to make that clear. We do anticipate money from FEMA. But I do want to emphasize that FEMA has told us they're a reimbursement base. We have to spend it first, and then they'll give it back to us. Now, we are working with them. We meet with them monthly. So that process is still going good, but we have still yet to spend all of our insurance proceeds. So FEMA does not kick in on any reimbursement until after all of our insurance proceeds are gone. So we will have some insurance proceeds left over for West Wilson Middle School. So just because West Wilson Middle School may cost $60 million does not mean that that's the county's bill. I just want to make that clear. But we'll bring more accurate numbers. I'll bring those to the board at our June board meeting, and then bring those over here to the Budget and Education committees on June 9th. I think that's that Thursday. So I want to tie that into our needs list, needs assessment that's on the back. And I'll let Mr. Luttrell touch on a couple things, but I just want to touch on this. If you look towards the bottom, you'll see $50 million right there. That is a placeholder. And that would not include any FEMA reimbursement or anything like that. So I just want to point that out, that does not include, that is a placeholder based on a bid we got. That could be $52 million, it could be $55, it could be $45. So now that would be for a stopgap in between when FEMA gives us reimbursement to get the construction of West Wilson Middle School going. Does that make any questions on that? I just don't want to freak anybody out and think we're asking for $60 million tonight, because that's a placeholder on here. I know it goes with the budget, but we just wanted to put that on here to make y'all aware. The next thing that's also on there that I know we're going through, we also will have something to present in June, is you'll notice the two pieces of land that we brought to the Budget and Education committees back a couple months ago, maybe 2 months ago. Our board will be hearing something from us in June, be presented to June, probably at our regular June board meeting on the 6th. So we plan to have everything, come back to y'all on June 9th. But again, those are just placeholders. We just wanted those to be on there so that we didn't forget about them. So I will let Mr. Luttrell talk about the rest of the things. I will point out the Chromebooks are the exact, that was there last year. And so were the roofs. Those are some repeats. You asked the question about bus age. I budgeted for 5 full-time bus age with all their fringes. But, the board could decide, hey, we want 10 part-time for that. But really, that would be for some of our most troubled routes or most rowdy. A lot of times at the middle school level there. That's what that is for. And then I'll touch on the counselors right there. Our board wanted to add 12 additional counselors, and that would be to try to get our counselor ratio now down, because sometimes you'll have one counselor for 800 students at our elementary, which is a lot. And then even at our high schools, some of our larger high schools, as they get to 2,000 students, that's one counselor for 500 students, which is a lot. So there is no actual state required ratio. There is a funding mechanism in BEP. I don't know it off the top of my head. You should. Mm-hmm. So is it 750? 750. Mm-hmm. But that's a funding ratio, and we are below that. We are, or I say above that, or doing better than that. But of course that we anticipate that going away next year. Mm-hmm. Well, it's essentially, here's your pot of money, do what you want with it. I mean, I'm simplifying that, but that's really what TISA was sold as to us as. So. Well, I'll touch on a couple of those real quick. I'll touch on a couple of those. So one of the first thing on needs list would be a 3% raise for classified staff, and really that's us trying to keep pace with some other districts around us that are including 4 or 5%. So that 3% raise for classified staff would be in addition to the 2% that was already built into our budget, and the 2% raise for teacher would be on top of the pay plan that our school board approved. So that would try to get us to stay in line as those other districts, as Rutherford went to 5% this year and Williamson went 4%. And I know Sumner did a unique thing. They went a percentage and increased every single one of their steps. I think it was 4,000 off the top of my head. So that's us trying to keep pace. Like I said, we did everything we could within our budget. But that's what those two things are. They would be in addition to the things in our budget. Any other questions on that as far as the accounting or math behind that? I know Mr. Luttrell can speak to a couple of those things. If you were including the entire general fund budget amount, yes, ma'am. Any other questions for me? Yes.
On the Chromebooks.
Yes, ma'am.
Students still pay a fee.
To have a Chromebook? Is that at the beginning of their part of the fee schedule? We do have a fee schedule. I don't know it off the top of my head that is part of it. Now, I will say every time one is damaged, they get one damaged for free. And if it's under warranty, we will cover that under warranty, even if it's after one damage. I can double check on that, but I know that any of those school fees go back directly to the schools to run the school. We don't see those at the central office. So, so any student fee that is paid as part of the beginning of the year, all of that money goes directly to that individual school. So, and let me say, a lot of that goes, we, the district, provide certain things for the school. We provide a certain amount of Kleenexes. We provide a case of copy paper for each teacher, but that's not enough. We do as much as we can, but all of those student fees go to additional things that the school wants to use, but none of that comes back to the central office.
I think what she's talking about is when Chromebooks first came in, and I only know this because I'm a parent, there was an insurance fee that we all paid. I think it was $30 a year. In the end, it ended up not actually being insurance. It was basically it became self-insurance. So I think there was at one point. I know for a fact we didn't pay it this year. And I don't think we did last year either. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think the last
I'm not aware. The 2 years, the year and a half I've been here, I'm not aware of anything like that. But I do know that, no questions asked, the first damage is covered. So there's no insurance paid for that. It's just you come back and your Chromebook's broken, we're going to cover it. One of our biggest issues we run into is chargers being lost. And we would love to replace those, but Dell charges us, the place we get the chargers from. We don't make any money. We just charge the exact dollar amount Dell charges us. And as much as I would love to give free chargers to everybody, I would be over here asking for a lot more than $177 million or 100. Yeah. So, yep. I don't. I can tell you that we have about 21,000 Chromebooks, and at least 12,000 of them are out of warranty. But I don't know the exact number that we replace every year. I can get that for you and bring it back, but I do know that about 21,000 total. And then keep in mind, we have to have a few additionals where we may have 19,800 students or 19,600. When that one Chromebook breaks and we bring it back to fix it, we've got to have them another one to hand out. So that's why there's 21,000. So that's why there's 21,000, and we have about 19,600 or so students. And so, but about 12,000 are out of warranty, give or take a few.
Keep asking these questions because I remember back a few years ago we had a lot of discussion on this. So I'm going to use Carroll Oakland for example. They're assigned so many Chromebooks, and those Chromebooks stay with that school.
Correct.
Or if that student leaves and goes to Tucker's Crossroad, does that Chromebook go with the student or stay at the school?
Right now, they stay at the school. Like through the year, they're in the media specialist there, checks those in and out every year. Now, one of the things we're going to next year is because we are starting to get shorthanded on Chromebooks, is K3 will not take their Chromebooks home. One, because that was where we were seeing some of the most damages. And two, we just don't have the number of Chromebooks. Now, ultimately, as we dwindle in the number of Chromebooks or we can't replace as many, that's when you would have to go as a worst case scenario, a classroom set or something like that. But
on 2 or 3 things on needs assessment. When we look at that 3% raise for classified staff, do remember this past year they got a 5%. And we put 2 in this year's budget. And we're still not where we're going to need to be. And that will be one of our focus on next year's budget, is looking to see if we can look at their pay schedule as well and make some adjustments. But that is a need. When we're paying starting pay for our EAs $9.50, $10 an hour, it's a real need. And that's just, I want to bring you to show you, not to shock you, we're going to have school on our budget, I promise you. But I want to show you what we're facing so you can see and see if there's anything you can do. The 2% raise for teachers, please don't let that shock you. But when we do the market comparison, this is what we're up against. Now, we were able to do it within our budget and get them to where it's an average of 3.99% raise across the board. But we did some adjustment with our pay plan. But we were able to do that within our budget. So I charged Michael. We've had a lot of interesting conversation the last 9 months. We've got along though. But I charged him with my first charge was I want to match Rutherford County. And that was I think he told me $6 million, and I told him he was wrong, and but he wasn't. That's the difference.
Is there any kind of way you know who we lose most of our
We do.
teachers to?
Yeah, we do surveys when they exit. I checked that this morning because I knew that was going to come up. Right now, and this is right now, that can change. That's happening right now in the next 2 weeks. That's when you're going to. But right now, we're going to lose 2 to Metro that have already told us, turned in their paperwork. We're losing 10 or 12 to Lebanon Special School District. We're losing, I think they told me, I'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, we're losing 6 or 8 to Rutherford County. And then the biggest 18 is leaving the profession. That was the reason they're leaving the profession. Now I do want everybody to understand that sounds, and it's terrible when it hits in your local school and it's your favorite teacher. It impacts us. We got almost 1,300 teachers. As we grow in this area around Metro Nashville, there's going to be movement. That you will never stop that movement, and people migrate. You know, a good teacher I found out today, her husband is being reassigned and will permanently be at Clarksville military. So guess what? They're making a decision to go live on the base. You can't. That's not about pay. That's not about what's going on there. That's life. And so, really, what I always looked at for retention rate, if we're 90, 91% in a district this size, that's pretty good. And we've been able to maintain that. And I don't know those numbers yet, Ms. Stafford, what that's going to look like. But we're monitoring that, and we are taking surveys. And so that was one of the things. Now, the issue with LSSD, a lot of time it is pay. And so I want to speak just a minute, because I know that's on everybody's mind, about the pay plan. Although you're not voting on the pay plan, but I'm willing to give you the information you need. I know you're getting questions like everybody else. When we looked at our pay plan, it was based on LOE, level of effectiveness, tied to testing. And the one thing that I heard loud and clear, I have been in front of every faculty member this school year. That's one of the first things I did. Scheduled, went to every school and handed them a card and said, let me have it. What do you want to change? What's wrong? They had to sign their name for me to take it. And it was overwhelmingly, I heard, get us off of our pay being tied to testing. So that was one of the main drivers. The other main driver to that, when we looked at applicants and hiring teachers, our current plan, the only scale that we have on our current plan is based upon a new teacher entering the district. And when I looked at that and laid it down beside these districts we compete with, anywhere from $6,000 to $12,000 difference. Well, you're not going to hire a 10-year teacher and then take a $10,000 pay cut when they can drive 30 minutes. So one of the things that we're noticing is we're getting people that are moving to our district that are teachers. They're coming in here from out of state. They've got teaching certificates. We're not even getting their applicants sometimes because they're driving out of here to Rutherford County because they can buy a house here cheaper. The tax rate they feel like's better. They've got a great school system for their kids, and they're driving to other counties to teach. Those people need to be teaching for us. But we've got to have a pay plan that we can do that on. That was another thing. When we went through this whole process, it was, Michael has done a lot of work, a lot of late hours. I'm not as young as him, but sometimes I get those 3 o'clock emails the next morning and think, you need to go to bed. But he has worked continuously to try to look at all this. And what we did is we laid down the people we compete with, their pay plan. Williamson, Rutherford, Sumner, and LSD. That's what we did. And we said, let's get as close to that as we can. And we have cut into it. We're not there yet. But what we're doing is going back to a step plan. Now, the one concern that we had, we knew it from, I think, one of the first conversations we had, we're going to have people off step. That LOE has been good for a lot of our teachers, I will tell you. And if it had worked the way it's designed by the state testing, great. But it was so confusing because if you remember all the years that state testing didn't work, then COVID, they scrapped it. So we had teachers receiving pay best of. What if? So we had some teachers, and they've done well with it because they're great teachers. All of our people do good. So they've benefited from it. So they were at the top end. And what we did also, most step plans in education world is 20 to 26 years. And then you don't receive any more money. So I charged Michael, I said, we're going to pay our people 30 years. If they're going to be in Wilson County for 30 years so they can get retirement, they get a step. And we did that. And to do that, now we had to drop the steps down a little bit. I can't, that's just what it took. So when he got all that work done, and then we started looking, and literally, we looked at every person's pay, but hid their names, listed all, it's one of the biggest spreadsheets I've ever looked at, that shows their years of experience, their degrees, here's what they make now, and here's what they would make on this new plan. And of our 1,300, Mike, you may have to help me out, over 800 are going to receive more than $1,100 raise this year. There is some that were frozen, and we said we can't freeze them. And we went to working on that. They're going to receive a $500 step, and that stays with them. If they're making $70,000, they're going to make $70,500, and our step might top out at $64,000. But in the future, they're not going to make any less money. If we give a 2% raise or 1.5 or a 0.8, whatever we can do, it's going to go across the board. And even at $70,500, they will get that on top of that. Well, if you do a 2%, that's over, a $1,400 raise. We're committed to them as well. And I think a lot of them don't understand that because they got used to a $1,100 step. And that's not guaranteed because it's based on that LOE. And the one thing I heard too from our teachers and our administrators, we've got to take some of this pressure off. We got good people. We know what we're doing. And it's a stressful situation. From the education side, all of that was tied to evaluations. And from my experience, when you're discussing evaluation and trying to coach an employee, and the first thing comes to their mind when they realize, I'm not going to be that level 4 teacher, and you're impacting my pay, guess what happens to that conversation? You don't have coaching. Now it's got personal. And that's not good. I think we can improve instruction and be more real with people. Here's what you need to work on to be a better teacher. That's what instructional leadership is about. So that was my reasoning. I've wrestled with this thing long and hard. I wouldn't have brought it if I don't think it puts us in a position to better compete. And I think looking for the ahead, I thought it was important that we went with this direction. Is it a perfect pay plan? If you can come up with a perfect pay plan in any business, I'd like to see it. I mean, but I do think that it puts in this position. So that was one of the things important. You're not voting, but I want you to have that information. I am willing to meet with any teacher. I've met with teachers individually. I've met with them groups. We will educate them going forward. And, you know, if our revenues can hold and we can continue within our budget to use that money to give it to our teachers, I am confident that it makes us more competitive going forward. So that's, but if we really want to get to start matching, we feel like it would take a 3% raise on top of that. That's how much difference. I mean, we're talking $10,000 to $12,000 difference from apples to apples and years of experience that teachers can leave our county for. I'm sorry, 2%. I had it for. We'll take 3 if you want to give it to me. The other thing, the counselors, that's important. And that was a high need area. Like Michael said, some of our elementaries 1-800. We're seeing behaviors coming out of COVID that we've never experienced. Our contracted services are having to go up. These are needs. And so that is something, and if we can't do it at this level, I promise you that'll be one of my charges next year to Michael. We've got to put more counselors in these buildings. So that's what the bus aids. And I want to say something. Our busing has been better this year, and I know you probably get complaints. Trust me, I get them too. But I want everybody to understand something. We're running 200 routes a day. We're transporting kids out of county. Our buses are running. That radio in my car, I don't care what time I'm in that car, that bus radio's going off. So 200 routes a day. And we're doing everything we can. They've done a tremendous job. We've hired probably more drivers this year than in recent years. We hire them, they get to work for us, and guess what? They get that CDL and they're gone. So our transportation department is actively seeking, and it is better. Some things that the committee's going to look at that we know. We've done extensive work on this. One of the things we've got to make sure is our routing is correct. We're going to be using a new device that will let parents know. They will get an app. They will get a call. Your bus is going to be 15 minutes late. It's going to be 30 minutes late. We think that will help some of the communication piece just so they know better. But that we already have this software, and we've not been using it, I don't think, to the fullest extent. We're going to let the computer tell us, do we need to combine this route? You know, if you run a route for 6 weeks and you don't have as many kids riding that route, we need to go back and adjust that route. See if we can combine some of these routes to take care of that. One of the biggest issues in talking to bus drivers, because I'm telling you, all people are important in education. But that old saying, Mr. Marlowe will understand this, if you can get them to school, feed them, and get them home, it's been a good day. And people take that tongue in cheek. We're going to teach them. Our teachers are great. But here's where the liability lies. And if you've ever watched one of these bus drivers, all they're dealing with handling that massive machine and all these kids. And for the most part, our kids are good. But we do have some troubled areas. And that's what we feel like the bus aid. We heard from our drivers, man, if you could get me an aid on there to take some of the pressure off me trying to drive a bus and look in the mirror and see what's going on. Now, this would just be a start, I'll tell you. We want to see if it works. Does it help? And we tried to put that in our budget. 6 months ago, I probably had that higher up the list, but we just couldn't. So that is a cost that we would like to see if that would work. I know some districts that are doing that, and I know that they feel real comfortable that it helps their bus transportation. Chromebooks, I'm just going to say it. We can all say we know the cost. I know the cost. It's become part of our education world. Whether we like it, don't like it, we are doing more emphasis this year. One of our in our trainings this summer will be more talking about, we're going to be monitoring and looking more for person-to-person instruction, teacher to student. We've got to get away from just living on a screen. I don't think that's best. But if we had not had these Chromebooks during COVID, I don't know what we would have done. And this is the reality of the world we live in. It's the reality of the future. It's not going away. It is a cost. Ideally, if you buy the Chromebooks, you wouldn't have to buy any textbooks. Well, I still believe kids need to fill that textbook. I just can't get away from that. I'll never get away from that. And you know what our kids are telling us on surveys and our parents? They still want to fill that textbook. So, but what has happened, these all the software programs, the testing, state's going to require, there's still some debate about that. You're going to have these devices. And it would be ideal to say we don't need them. I'll be honest. That's a huge budget save. But this is where we're at. Michael mentioned 21,000 devices, 12,000 of them are out of warranty. So it's going to continue to be an issue. I told you last year, if you remember, that I would be back with this on here. I don't have all the answers. We're going to take some steps, not let as many go home. The next step probably is looking at, do we go back to classroom sets? But what's happened with the textbooks, they're smart. That's why they make billions of dollars in America. They've combined the use of Chromebook with the textbook. I thought 9 months ago, well, this will be easy. We're just going to buy Chromebooks and tell them we don't want your textbook. You know what the difference is if you buy their software versus their $10? So what they do is they package it together. So that's where we're at. This will be continuous, ongoing issue. So you have that number there. We did use some ESSER money, but this is what we know. I mean, I know right now over half of my Chromebooks are out of warranty.
How much of your curriculum is actually delivered on Chromebooks?
I don't want to say curriculum is delivered because you're still going to see teachers without using. But here's what you get into. Our kids, this generation, that's where about all of your assignments in some form, they're being used at an unbelievable. Yeah. It's.
Maybe the wrong word, but
Yeah.
how much of your lessons, if you didn't have Chromebooks,
We're using them daily. Yeah, we're using them daily. And I will say that'll be the next great debate in education. It's staring us right in the face. Some people are starting to say, now I still believe this, a talented teacher can teach without a Chromebook. I believe that wholeheartedly. But I'm telling you what we're doing, because here's one of the things that I know in just watching these young people that are graduating. They're taking those skills that they use every day in school and they're putting that to use right in the workplace. Workforce is wanting it too. They're expecting it. That's part of, can you handle that? So I don't think we can ever say we're going to have to go away from this. It's just something we've got to figure out. Yep, $375. And then, but that's the bare Chromebook. Where they get you, now you've got to put all the Excel, you've got to put all the Office. Yeah. No. What package?
On the Chromebook, so it's ready to use, and then we buy software curriculum that goes with it. So, but it includes the actual Chromebook itself to be able to get on any software that as we change curriculum or as the state mandates things, then the state testing is on those and those types of things. Now, the state will pay for some of that. The Chromebook itself comes ready to use for $375, give or take $1, and then maybe $376, but $375 is. Sorry. Yes, correct.
Summer roofing program is on there. If you remember last year, and I was kind of still starry-eyed, and I don't remember all the detail, but I do have a pretty good memory. We agreed to take part of that, and we did one this year. And I just want to make, we didn't get any money. Of course, we didn't come back asking for any, but I just want to keep showing that on the needs assessment. And then the land in West Wilson, that's probably you're probably shocked to see that on there, but I want to get it out there. This is what we're facing together. The last thing was capital project maintenance needs, and you can see, and I'm so proud that we were able to put some within our budget. I think one of the most important costs there's nothing worse than building these buildings and then not maintaining them. And then when you have to catch up, you got to really catch up. So we're committed. And we got into discussion, and I want to mention my board members. These board members, let me tell you about these board members. They represent our communities. They'll even fight for them. And that's okay. That's what they're elected. That's what they should do. That's how government should work. And they don't care to call me and say, look, I want you to look at this. That's great. Well, they've all got needs in their schools. And everybody's not getting these big brand new schools. We still operating in schools in the 60s. And we've got to take care of them. And so through that discussion, everybody's got something they want. And that's okay. And I'm the one that said put $1 million in there, and we can take care of a lot of these needs. I will tell you that's not enough. But if I could get $1.5 million, $2 million reoccurring every year, I won't be in here asking for emergency elevators, emergency chillers. We're going to take care of it. When a building needs painting, we should do that. We shouldn't have to be asking. That's part of owning a house, owning a building, and taking care of it. And so these are some things. You know, we build fine buildings. I'll put them up with anybody, our campuses. It's amazing. Folks, there's maintenance needs to those. It's not over just when you can move in and use it, and then if you don't maintenance it 20 years ago, you got a mess that's going to be left for somebody else here sitting in this seat. I want to start trying to get a hold of that. I don't know if you can do it, but I think I've committed, you see in my budget, but we have that many needs. I can just sit and rattle off projects that I know we need to be taken care of. That's really going to save this county money if you take care of them properly. Moisture. You know, there's some of these buildings need sealing. You'd be surprised, some of these old bricks, if you seal them, how much that would help your moisture. You know, when I walk in buildings and some of our older buildings, Mount Juliet Middle is a beautiful building, but it needs some care. And we should be taking care of it. So, Wilson Central, it's not that old, but we've got stuff. You know, we've already got, there's a project going over, we're going to take care of a drain. It's been a problem for years. It's going to be fixed this summer. If we have to go cut it up and re-pour it, we're going to do it. We're going to take care of it. But that cost. And so I think you got to start looking at that year in, year out. What can you do? That's our needs assessment. Any questions?
Well, comment, question. A few years ago, we had a report that was in a book form similar to this that had every school and every principal was given this paperwork to fill out about every school, and that was presented to us, 2 or 3 years in a row. And they were working toward just what you were talking about. Did they still do that? Is that still a process?
We have those, and a lot of those projects have been, they've been done. I know when I was a principal, my needs got met. It might be 4 years after the fact, but eventually. But here's the thing: we can have all the plans we want. You got to have money to do it. And let me tell you something: a plan on a 60-year-old building can change overnight. When you got to take care of the immediate need. So great plan, but you do that one time. I want us to continuously say these are the 5 projects this year. These are the 5 projects next year that we know, and try to get ahead of some of this stuff.
But would that be helpful to the administration if the principals did that, if the schools did that themselves?
So we do
You
have
update it?
something like that. The dollar amount's just so high, if I had to put it on the assessment, it would probably double our budget. Now, we have, our board did approve a 5-year kind of capital plan that has some maintenance needs. And we thought we could narrow one and try to attack those over the 5 years. But our limiting factor is really budget, because when you look at one school, it may need $15 million. you know, and with us growing so fast, we can't come over here and say, I need $15 million for this school, but I also need $40 million for the Randy Elementary School somewhere because we need it. And so, that's really the reason you don't see, you know, listed every school in that needs assessment, because it would probably double our budget. if we
What's the oldest school in the county that has not been updated?
Portions of Lakeview, for sure. I mean, I've got a project there that really needs to be done. Apparently, there's no weep holes in the brick. We've done some work.
There was an addition there, but the old part of the building that still has those little, like, I view it like an atrium, you know, it's just glass and a little door. But none of those have been touched. You know, when we renovated some other buildings, like at Carroll Oakland or Southside, we went into a facelift for the rest, but some of the portions of Lakeview and some of the portions of like Watertown Middle, didn't get that facelift. They're still the same original.
I was
windows.
Watertown, Sarah.
And Tucker still has some window air conditioning units and stuff like that.
Yeah, Lakeview's got needs. Watertown Middle's got major needs. And this is no fault of any of us. This is the explosion, the growth. I mean, but I think at some point we got to start saying we got to do something. So, any other questions for us?
So this $1 million, this would be going toward projects like the kindergarten hallway at Lakeview, or, you know, boilers and chillers and that kind of things, and not lockers?
I don't have any intention. Most of our schools take care of their own lockers. But I will say this: if we put lockers in a place and they absolutely fail, or they wore out, yeah, I think we should. I don't have a problem with. But I'm not looking at I'm looking at paint. I'm looking at parking lot. I'm looking at some fields. You know, we build these nice fields. Well, when you build fields on field, you got trouble, Tommy. And over 4 or 5 years, it'll expose every rock. It'll sink. We should be going in there and taking care of that. And those are costly items that I don't think our booster clubs should be having to pay for. Just that's my professional opinion. And so these are some things that I would like to start looking at.
I just wanted to do the priority.
I'm a big paint guy. You can change a lot of things if you put a good coat of paint on it. Makes everybody feel better. Yeah. And we've done that, and we got people that will do that. But there's nothing better. You want to help morale of a building? Let teachers walk into a freshly painted, professionally painted, changing ceiling tile. You know, in 40 years, that right there is going to look bad. You ought to come in and change those. That helps morale. It helps outlook. I'm pretty big on that stuff, and I think that's why I've included it.
Just a comment to what Wendell said. I want to compliment him because when he was transferred to Southside, there was the biggest difference changed in that. It was
Okay.
cleaned up, it was painted, and I told him,
And it's still there today. You walk in that building, I was in there the other day. It's a pretty building because and once you get that, that matters and that continues. Yes, that's right. Any other questions?
Move the budget be accepted. All those in favor, you second. Is anybody gonna wake up, or are we just? dead here?
Committee, we were talking about.
If I'm talking, it's education, he's talking, it's budget. Come on, people, work with me here.
Well, that's what I was waiting. Okay. So you have your
Just
second,
motion to
right?
accept it, that's all I'm asking.
Okay.
said second.
He said
Yeah,
second, so,
okay.
okay, everybody else sing the song together. All
Aye.
those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Okay, for the budget committee,
Second.
motion and a second. Is there any additional questions for these gentlemen before we accept? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank y'all.